Carl, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. The hashtags, Twittery thing. Who are the Twittery people in the room? No, there must be more than 5 twits in the room. I'm sorry. Anyway, if you're not on Twitter, you really should be on Twitter. It's such a brilliant, brilliant place to find out what's happening in the whole ed-tech world. I'm at mberry on Twitter. The reason why the hashtag thing is important is, if this works well, if the technology is running properly, the footnotes to the slides should be fed automatically into the #MGL Spring Conference hashtag. Okay, that doesn't leave many of the 140 characters left when you've done #MGL Spring Conference. Some of the footnotes, if you're wanting to find out more about what's on the slide, that's where you should get a footnote to see whether that works out. Check afterwards. Hi, I'm Miles. I'm currently not the Chief Executive of NACE, and that would be a lovely job. I'm currently the Chair of NACE, which is like Chair of Governors compared to Head Teacher, which is a lovely, lovely thing to be doing. I'm only doing this for a year and having a whale of a time doing it and talking at events like this. NACE is the ICT Association, traditionally the ICT Subject Association, but we're now much, much more concerned as a group about advancing technology through education. So technology, enhanced learning, and of course ICT as a subject in its own right, or perhaps we should be saying computing as a subject in its own right. I need to change the first slide here. Who are the NACE members in the room? Oh, there's even less than the Eclipse in the room. There's a NACE member over there. It's good to have you here, it really is. Did you see my message this morning? On the talk list, we're looking for nominations for NACE's Board of Management. So if you're interested in giving up 3 weekends a year, see me out. Thank you, Miles. Right, my day job, though, is training the next generation of outstanding teachers at the University of Roehampton. Any Roehampton alumni in the room? Oh, never mind. Okay. Roehampton's a lovely place to work. I'm having a pound time there. I've been doing that for 3.5 years now, and subject lead for ICT education. I've got a small team, but really, really valuable place to work. Before that, I spent 18 years across 4 different schools. Much of that time as an ICT coordinator in primary school. Most recently, 3 years as a primary school head teacher. Hence the prematurely grey hair. I'm not nearly as old as I look. Who are the head teachers in the room? Oh, well done. Are any of you feeling worried about how your school's going? You've got really good deputy heads, really good together. Lots and lots of support for your head teachers, folks. They're really important people doing really good jobs. So where we're going over the next, we'll see, 45 minutes, 50 minutes or so, is I want to talk a little about what I'm doing at Roehampton, very, very briefly, talk a little about some of the ideas that we fed into developing a new computing curriculum. Then we'll have some chance to look at the story so far, how we got to where we were yesterday from where we started a few years ago, so some of the sort of background to that. Give you a chance to have a look at the new programme of study documents, which are not quite what we sent into the GME in the first place, and the history of that. The dip, as the policies say, track changes between what we sent in and what comes back is interesting territory. Then we'll have a look at some of the challenges which still lie ahead, and then present an alternative way of doing these things. Anybody here working in an academy? If your school becomes an academy by September 2014, it dropped out of the whole of the national curriculum. So if you didn't like what the Secretary of State announced yesterday, there are alternatives. And one wonders how much of the political agenda there is, well, here's the curriculum. Don't I think there is an alternative? I don't know. Okay, so this is where I work. Well, actually, this is where our Vice Chancellor works. My office is made out of breeze blocks some distance around the corner from there. Roehampton, like 1 or 2 other universities, is a collegiate institution. It's made up in that case of 4 constituent colleges. I'm working at Froebel College, which is named after the German educator Friedrich Froebel, who invented the kindergarten. Here we have, back in the 19th century, here's a picture of a 19th century German kindergarten. Isn't it gorgeous? Early years practitioners in the room? Okay, would this pass its EYFS inspection? I don't know. I mean, the adult-child ratio is moving to the territory that Liz Trusty has been identified with. I'm not absolutely sure how much directed activity is going on, but we have. And this is kind of the point of Froebel's vision of kindergarten. A rich, stimulating learning environment. We have plenty of opportunities for children to learn together in a setting like that. And I think that's absolutely crucial, whether it's online space or it's real-world space. Anybody working in an RLE or got an RLE in their school? Real learning environments, like a virtual learning environment. Call it a classroom floor. Okay, what else have we got? The other thing Froebel's famous for is coming up with these notions, this idea of Froebel gifts. So in the very early stages of a child's development, Froebel said you give the child particular, beautifully constructed presents as they grow up. And those presents are things which they play with and explore. And then he came up with a particular way in which you present the gift to the child. I'm not sure that many bother with that level of detail now. But you'll be familiar, I hope, with things like this from your own childhood and what the youngest children in your school are playing with. You'll be familiar, I hope, with Lego. We've got a whole room full of Lego out there. This is where you'll be able to find the F2B, sections. And of course, there's things like the Kano, we've got stickle bricks, and we've got all of that lovely, lovely building material, stuff that we can make things out of. Why do we put things like this into the hands of the youngest children in our school? Why do we give them toys like this to play with? This is not a rhetorical question. Anyone? Don't all rush at once.
Creative, it shows imagination.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. It's an opportunity for creativity, it's an opportunity for them to express their imagination. Gold star over here, that's a really good answer. Other answers?
Gross and fine motor control.
Gross and fine motor control, absolutely. That dexterity stuff. Other answers?
Problem solving.
Problem solving, absolutely. When you're making something like this, especially if you go play with Lego, you've got really difficult problems to solve. And they're problems which you feel sound so much. Any other answers?
Because they like to play.
Of course they like to play. And do we not like to play too? Why stop at kindergarten? Why stop in early years with the playing with things? Let's carry that on a little further, please. Okay? And one other answer. The answer Froebel, I think, might have given in German, which I don't attempt to pronounce here, is this notion that we give children these sorts of toys so they learn about the world around them by playing with toys like this. They learn about conservation of number. They learn about conservation of volume. They learn that some things won't balance on other things. And they learn that you can only get so high if you're not being really, really careful. You learn about how gravity works. You learn about how statics, how mechanics work. So you come up with this mental schema, forgive the Piagetian phrase, understanding how the world works through playing with toys like this. Nobody in the room suggested, I hope nobody under their breath was thinking, it's so that they can become construction workers, or it's so that they'll become architects, or so that they'll become builders or whatever. Some will, I'm sure, but that's not why we put toys like this into the hands of young children. So in America, Frank Lloyd Wright, great American architect, went to a Froebel kindergarten, and there are people who argue that some of his early experiences playing with toys like that influenced some of his later architectural work. I don't know. Compare, contrast. There are points in common there. But not everybody who plays with toys like that becomes the next Frank Lloyd Wright. Not everybody who programs Scratch in a primary school or programs Bebot in a primary school is going to become a software engineer or a computer scientist. Heaven forbid. But by playing with toys like that, they develop an understanding of how the world, particularly how technology, works, but it gives them insights into the ideas of computer science, which are far more than simply how the technology, how the device in front of you functions. Okay, nevertheless, developing an understanding of how the device in front of you functions matters. And how do we do that? This is my daughter Sophie. This is taken at the age of 15 months. Have I just given the child's name, photograph, first name, surname? Please, don't tweet any of it. Right. So what she's doing here is developing her schema of how the computer works. So first understanding of a computer is if I shut the lid, then mummy or daddy pays more attention to me. Okay? She then develops an understanding that if I press this button, it springs to life or it dies. If I move my finger across this bit of it, then things happen. If I tap on this bit, then other things happen. So she's already, by the age of 15 months, got this notion of cause and effect, if you want to, the modern way of machine architecture of input, process, output. I do something on the keyboard, the mouse, the power switch, the computer performs according to certain rules which I can then learn for myself, and certain output appears up on the screen. This is an important, learning through play, learning through using the technology develops that understanding. She's not learning word processing skills here. Okay? She's not yet making art. She can make pretty good YouTube videos of herself, but I don't think that's publicly. Okay, what she's doing is coming up with an understanding of technology. And I think this is really the big difference between the old curriculum, the 99 curriculum, and the new 2014 curriculum. It's not so much about skills anymore. It's about a knowledge of how technology works and an understanding of the ideas of computation, which is, I think, also what's getting here. Perhaps not. Okay, back in 2007, Demos report Their Space looked at how young people were using technology, and so there are, broadly speaking, 4 categories of young people's use of technology. There are many of them that are very good, very effective information gatherers. They're not bad at being everyday communicators. Fewer of them are the creative producers. Fewer still are digital pioneers. Think about the children you're teaching. Think about the children leaving your Year 6 class. Not bad as information gatherers. They can find stuff on Google or other search engines. I'm told other search engines are available. Just out of interest, we've got 130 or so people in the room. Is there anybody in the room who doesn't use Google as their default search engine? Okay, right, okay. And never since the Revelations, one organisation controls so many people's access to information. We'll come back to that another time. Okay, the everyday communicator stuff, again, they're not bad at this by the time they leave Year 6. We might want them to be a little more safe, a little more responsible, and a little more respectful of one another. But they can keep in touch with you, they can keep in touch with their friends, like one technology or another. So they're not bad at those two. How many of them, though, choose to produce things creatively using media when you're not setting it, or digital media when you're not setting it as work during a lesson? How many of us choose to work creatively with technology? And how many of them can really be described as digital pioneers? If you want, the geeks, but, geeks with social skills too. That's absolutely fine. So perhaps our role as educators is to meet them where they are, the top 2 things, which they're not bad at, thanks in part to the good teaching that's happened, and take them on to the stuff which they can't yet do or choose not necessarily to do, the being creative producers, the being the digital pioneers. Meeting them where they are, taking them on to someplace new. Anybody know what TFL stands for? I was hearing it, I heard it, I think. Okay. Down in my neck of the woods we call this Transport for London. Okay. You've heard of AFL, Assessment for Learning. TFL, Teaching for Learning. Yeah? Meet them where they are, take them on to someplace they wouldn't have got otherwise, which is what Transport for London tries to do on a good day. Okay, what are they good at? They're good at being users of technology. Contradict me here, this works far better, by the way, as a conversation than presentation. Just call out, that's stupid, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay? They're not bad as users of technology. Okay? They're good at consuming content. They can access stuff online. They enjoy working with digital media, or consuming digital media. They're not bad as communicators. They are, depending on your definition here, the definition is formal part of digital literacy, not bad at being digitally literate in the sense of the equivalent of being able to read and write in the digital domain. They also, and we may wish to contradict me later, are not bad at keeping themselves safe online by the time they leave primary school, thanks in no small part to the work which primary school teachers do with them, and they have a whole cluster of pretty good ICT skills. So where do we take them on to? Well, for each of those things. Okay? Take them on from being users of technology to makers of technology. Take them on from being consumers of digital content to creators of digital content. From being able to communicate with one another to being able to collaborate with one another. Such a key skill for the 21st century job market, isn't it? Okay, from being literate in the digital domain to being critical in the digital domain. Not what does it say, can I find it? But why does it say that? And why is Google showing me that at the top of the list? And what's all that stuff happening down the side there? If I click on that, will that be reliable information? Or is money changing hands in order to show me that? And how do you know that is the best output? That sort of digital criticality, I think, is where we take them on to. From being safe online, which does matter, please don't get me wrong, to being responsible online. I think that matters just as much. And moving, as I say earlier, from the skills which they have to the understanding which, by and large, relatively few of them have, like new trainees. When we meet them back in Year 1 or starting the PGC, we make them do this online audit. We ask them loads of questions about their IT skills. We ask them also to evaluate their knowledge, their understanding. On skills, they score really well. They've been in 14 years, even the undergraduates, of education. They're not bad at IT skills. When we ask them to rate their own understanding, they score themselves far, far lower. Now, the group of PGCE students, these are graduates I was working with yesterday, how many of you can find what you want on Google? Every hand in the room goes up. How many of you can explain to me the difference between the web and the internet? Nobody is willing to put their hand up and say, I know what that is. They have skills, but they need more understanding. I think, again, disagree with me if you wish, please. And, lovely stuff about craftsmanship here. Okay, my computer scientist friends get a bit snippy about the whole sort of craft of coding and learning to program a computer as a craft skill. And do you remember the old days when IT was put alongside design and technology in the green ring light? Anybody else old enough in the room to remember that? Okay. People now really computing is an important science, and we've got that on the back there. But there is also a craftsmanship element to this, and there's a whole corpus of material written about the craft of coding and the craft of software development. And one of the points about craftsmanship in general, I think we all feel comfortable with this, is that you understand something by learning to fix it. And this applies so much in the domain of programming. It also applies so much in the domain of digital media, PowerPoint presentations, and everything else online or on computers. But it also, I think, applies in our line of work too. Do you not find that your understanding of learning, of education, of teaching, the craft of teaching, is so enhanced by the problems that you have, the lesson that goes wrong that you need to fix, or the child who you've really never been able to connect to, you don't feel you've been able to take their learning on. I'm sure all my friends teachers. But by fixing things, we learn to understand how they work. So that experience of debugging. Okay. If you're teaching IT at A-level, you kind of have to tell your students about this. This is how software gets written. The company comes up with a list of requirements, the people in the development house designs a set of functional requirements which will make sure that it meets those requirements. Then relatively low-paid people who don't get much say on what they're doing end up implementing that. They're sort of called programmers in that line of work. They put this into practice. And then we need to do the testing. The testing is an integral part of this process. We need to check that it actually satisfies the requirements and does what it's supposed to do. And then you get to little ticking over contracts so that you can keep the stuff maintained. This is the model which we're generally teaching at A-level about how IT solutions get developed. And of course, this has worked very, very well throughout the public sector. The NHS database is an excellent mind. You've got a similar sort of thing going on, do you not think, when it comes to curriculum development? The Secretary of State may say, there should be more computer science. And then various people wearing suits meet together in hotel conference rooms and say, okay, so that's what we've got to do. Let's put this in and put this in, and we argue about this, and we draw up, a curriculum document, a program of study. We then give it to relatively low-paid people who don't have much say, their line of work programmers and our line of work teachers, to put that into practice, to take the ring binder and teach to that thing, which they didn't have much input into saying whether it worked or not. We do a whole host of testing. We do verification very much. We check that that has actually done what it's supposed to do, or perhaps not. And then once in a while we bring out a PCA scheme of work or another set of ring binders or a set of training materials. So this model of the waterfall approach, we start with, this is what you should do, so let's just keep this ticking over, is kind of how we've done curriculum in the past, and still, by and large, how we do it. So what have we got here? This is, I just want to include a little bit about the technology stuff on EYFS before we get into the Key Stage 1 and 2 territory. The new EYFS framework has reference to technology, but it doesn't say as much as it used to do. A range of technology is used in places as homes and schools. Children selecting and using technology for particular purposes. Notice the degree of autonomy which they're provided with in early years. They select, they use the technology that's appropriate. They're coming up with technological solutions to problems which they pose themselves. There's also, and you might not notice it, the stuff in the thing about being imaginative here, about children use what they have learnt about media and materials in original ways, creativity, thinking about uses and purposes. That's really important in terms of creating media. And they represent their own ideas, thoughts, and feelings through design and technology. And I think we want to include information technology there, wouldn't we? Art, music, dance, role play, and stories. So you had children making stuff, understanding how it's used, and making stuff. Okay? The reference which we had to programmable toys largely disappeared, although there's nothing to stop you using it. You're absolutely fine to carry on using that. Okay, you're familiar with this document. This is the old national curriculum from 1999. We broke the subject up into those 4 areas: finding things out, developing ideas, making things happen, exchanging and sharing information, reviewing, modifying, evaluating work as it progresses. Top one, third one, no problem at all. We're good at finding stuff on the internet as part of what we do, finding stuff on the web. We're good at making presentations or creating documents or sending emails or making web pages or whatever. We do a lot of that. Typical, generic, multi-purpose ICT lesson plan. Find something else on the internet, find something out on the internet, make a presentation about it. Who's done talk on those? Okay, we've all things like that, I'm sure. Nothing wrong with it, but we can go so much further than that. Ofsted reckoned the second one, developing ideas, making things happen, which is where the programming is. They call it sequencing instructions, but they mean programming. Was tended to be more honoured in the breach than the observance. It tended to be the thing which teachers felt less comfortable doing themselves. Well, that's not surprising. We use the web to find stuff out ourselves, day in, day out. We make digital media day in, day out. How many of us program computers day in, day out? It's not part of what most of us as teachers do. And thus it's something which many of us find harder to teach. The fourth one strikes you as really odd. It still strikes me as really odd. Reviewing, modifying, and evaluating work as it progresses. Is that just in the ICT curriculum? Would you not want them reviewing, modifying, and evaluating their work as it progresses in like all of the subjects you teach? Okay, if you look at the detail there, it doesn't say very much about using computers. The word computer is not mentioned. The word internet is only mentioned in square brackets and italics as an example of places you might go to find out information. CD-ROM is another example. Anybody used a CD-ROM in the last 5 years? Okay, right. So it was looking a bit long in the tooth. Time to move on. Time to move on, Miles. Jim Rhodes, at the last days of the previous government, said let's put ICT there at the heart of the curriculum alongside literacy and numeracy as something which is essential for learning and life. Not being able to read, not being able to do simple maths will limit your career choices to a huge extent. And I think we're kind of at the point now that ICT is on that list. If you can't learn a computer, it's really hard to do a PGCE, believe me. And it's kind of hard to do lots and lots of jobs. Think about the number of jobs where you never have to use a computer. Vanishingly small these days. Think about the opportunities for further learning or further study. So Rose argued it belonged at the heart of the curriculum, not as a subject in its own right, but there alongside literacy and numeracy is something essential for learning life. There's a copy of this on the internet. I think I might have tweeted the link, I'm not sure. Does anybody tell me if the Twitter thing is working? Yeah. That's good. Okay. So follow the Twitter feed if you want the link to that. Robin Alexander at the same time did an independent review of the primary curriculum, and he said, well, ICT is just really a sort of literacy, isn't it? He saw ICT in terms of find things out, tell people about it. The item 1 and item 3 on the old program of study. And I suppose item 4 as well, yeah? And so in his version of the curriculum, ICT is part of a widely expanded definition of literacy to include all of that digital literacy stuff. He didn't include very much programming in there, and of course that was not accepted by either the previous or the current government. So, this is an old quote. Does it still ring true? In many schools today, the phrase computer-aided instruction means making the computer teach the child. One might say that the computer is being used to program the child. In my vision, the child programs the computer. Doing so both acquires a sense of mastery over a piece of the most modern and powerful technology and establishes an intimate contact with some of the deepest ideas from science, from mathematics, from the art of intellectual model building. Going back to the stuff I was talking about earlier. Anybody recognise the quote? Go on. Yeah, when?
55 years ago?
Not bad at all, 33 years ago. I think 1980. Isn't that astonishing? And how much of that still rings true? How many ICT lessons, not your schools, but my trainee schools, is it, well, I've got half an hour, 40 minutes in the computer room, let's go in there and do education, city, or mathematics. Nothing wrong with education, city, mathematics. Are they here response? Mathematics. Okay, but that's not actually developing an understanding of the computer. It's using the technology well. The children are learning maths. But are they developing their knowledge, their understanding of computation through things like that. So Papert argues that actually drill and practice is something where you put the child in charge to write the drill and practice program, rather than just use the drill and practice program. Okay, the next gen report, so now looking at how we move on from this picture of where we were with the old curriculum, which, you know, you could do almost anything you want. As long as you taught email at some point in Key Stage 2, everything else you could do with technology, you could find a hook to hang it on. It was a very encompassing, very inclusive curriculum. But it became apparent that it wasn't working perhaps as well. Okay, we have Moore's Law in ICT, don't we? That the technology gets better and better. Every year and a half, 2 years, doubles in speed, doubles in power, doubles in capacity. Yeah? And so a curriculum written back in 99. Remember what ICT was like back in 99? Computers that went in order to connect to the internet. CD-ROMs, Windows 98. Yeah? I mean, you know, the school I was working at in 98, I think we did have an internet connection. The school I moved to in 2000 didn't until I got it. Yeah? Can you imagine what it was like teaching ICT or children using ICT without access to the web, access to the internet? How much that's been become. So next year, commissioned by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, they were interested in what can we do to help support the UK games industry and the UK visual effects industry. Games industry, visual effects industry in this country, some of the most creative, vibrant work in the world within these fields, but starting to lag behind. In terms of their contribution, their place in the league table, going down over time. So Ed Vasey commissioned Alex Hope and Ian Livingston to write a report about what can be done to change that position, to improve the position of the games industry, visual effects industry. And recommendation number 1 in the report is about the pipeline. And in order to have a good games industry, visual effects industry, you need good people coming out of school, into university, then into the games industry. So they said, let's tackle that at the start of the pipeline and put computer science onto the national curriculum as an essential discipline. So that was 3 years ago now. And then you have Eric Schmidt. Who's Eric Schmidt anyway? Okay, Eric Schmidt is Google's executive chairman, so possibly one of the most powerful men in the world. At the time he was making the speech, I think he was Google's chief executive officer. He's stepped down to that, one of the founders, take on that role now. So speaking in Edinburgh at the Taggart Lecture, as part of the TV Media Festival, we have this sort of thing.
I'm flabbergasted to learn that today computer science is not even taught as standard in UK schools. And the RAEng curriculum, by the way, focuses on teaching how to use software, but it doesn't teach people how to make it. This risks throwing away your great computing heritage.
I'm not sure that's entirely fair. If you look at the old program study, it did have writing sequences of instructions there in both Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. You'd have thought you could have checked that by, I don't know, Googling it or something before making the speech. But you know, to be fair, he's moving the emphasis, or wants to see the emphasis moved from end user skills to programming to computer science. And then we then are in this process. The new government, of course, as I say, rejected Jim Rose's recommendations for the curriculum, and so they say we're going to do our own review of this. They put together a panel of experts led by Tim Oates from Cambridge Assessment, and they come up with this set of recommendations. They say ICT shouldn't be part of the national curriculum. They had this notion of the basic curriculum, which is something that has to be taught, but is left to schools to decide what's taught within those subjects. And they say both DMT and ICT don't have sufficiently disciplinary coherence and thus belong on the basic curriculum without a statutory program of study. Still required to teach them, but left to schools to decide what to do. So we recommend that ICT is reclassified as part of that basic curriculum. Secretary of State stands up at BET a year ago. This is only a year ago now. This is January 2012. And says, 22-minute speech, which includes the following.
This could be a dramatic change in just a few years' time. Once we remove the roadblock of the existing ICT curriculum, instead of children, all out of their minds, being taught how to use Word and Excel by teachers who are involved, we could have a lecturer able to run simple 2D computer animations using an MIT tool from scratch. By 16, they could have an understanding of formal logic using their own universal courses. They could be writing their own apps for their smartphones. This isn't an every promise from an MP. This is a prediction of experts like leaders who are already got world-class companies in computer science. Now, this new computer science course will reflect what you all know. The subject is rigorous, fascinating, and intellectually challenging. After all, the founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg,
I would drink this. Right, so you have that notion that there's a problem with ICT as it stands at the moment. It's focusing too much on skills. It needs to be more intellectually stimulating. You may wish to disagree with that. And if you're an academy, that's absolutely fine. You can do what you want with it. Interesting. But his solution to it then is let's leave it up to teachers to decide. This, if you agree with what he says, ICT needs to become more intellectually stimulating. It needs to include more computer science. Then the solution he's proposing of let's leave that up to teachers seems an odd solution, don't you think? Yeah? How many of you have been wishing you could teach more computer science? Only I can teach more programming. I want to do more computer science. Why can't I teach you learn algebra? Oh, because the program of study doesn't include those words. Yeah? I don't think anybody was thinking that the program of study was what was frustrating. GCSE exam specifications is another story, but they don't so much apply to the folks in this room. This notion of disciplined curriculum, for these 2 years you can do what you want. You don't teach ICT, but like the expert panel we're recommending, let's put this onto the basic curriculum and let schools choose what they do. I'm not convinced, well, okay, they are seeing computer science, but I don't think it's merely as a result of this application. So there's a consultation that follows up from that, and loads of people say, well, if you want to do that, don't do it that way. There needs to be a statutory program of study. It needs to be part of the national curriculum alongside the other subjects that are there. It's just as important, or possibly more important than them, given that we're in the third millennium now. Just after the BET report, his speech at BET, the Royal Society report after a year and a half's consultation, and they say, well, actually, it's the word, it's the name that's the problem. ICT is discredited, we need to rebrand it, let's call it computing, and that's going to make a difference. So let's actually identify the 3 aspects of computing, as they call it. So they suggest, next slide please, that we get rid of ICT, big black apostrophe, ICT, and we then identify the 3 parts of that, the digital literacy, which they define in a very narrow sense of can you use Microsoft Office. They don't say Microsoft Office, but it's implied. Okay, can you do the information technology stuff, which I think they're seeing in terms of the sort of systems engineer type skills rather than the digital media type skills, although they do mention digital media there. And can you do the stuff which I think they were particularly interested in, which if you look at the makeup of their panel, and indeed while it was authoring it, which is the computer science stuff. So let's replace ICT with these 3 separate domains, and let's group them together called computing. Okay, so as I say, we responded to Mr. Gove and his let's just discipline the program study, and he came back and actually appears to have listened to what people said. I know, it's shocking, isn't it? Climb down, humiliating climb down. No, good thing, okay? So he says, look, we know that this is an important subject, and rejecting the expert panel's recommendations and not really going with what the Royal Society said, which said just make digital literacy compulsory. Let's have ICT there as a statutory national curriculum subject with a new programme of study, interestingly at all 4 key stages. I don't think many of us were wanting it there as a statutory entitlement at key stage 4, but be careful what you ask for. So there was the commitment last June to making that happen. So how are you going to draw up this new programme of study? All of the other national curriculum subjects, they meet together in rooms in statutory buildings and sort of consult secretly on what should be on the programme of study. For ICT, they did these openly. They commissioned the British Computer Society, Royal Academy of Engineering, to act as honest brokers, to pull together a group of experts in the field and to sit round tables and to come up with that new programme of study for ICT, working to a particular set of rules, working to a particular memorandum of understanding. So a small working party to write the first draft, publish that late October and see what people thought about that, and then revise the draft, send it into the DFE, and then the DFE decide what changes they want to make and how that's going to look when it emerges in public. And it was my pleasure as chair of MACE to be part of that process. So yes, you had experts in the room, and you also ended up with me sitting in on some of these meetings too. And we did, to be fair, get a few teachers in there as well, more secondary school teachers than primary school teachers, lots of computer science back then, computer science representatives from the industry. So it was a broad consensus that came up with the things that we sent in to the department at the end of November. If you look at bcs.org/ICTPOS, you can see the recommendation, what we sent to them. So then there's this sort of silent 2 months where they go away and say, don't I love it, don't I love it, let's put that in, let's put some more of that in. And so that's what emerged yesterday. So we have replaced the old information and communications technology, that's what Hansard says, curriculum, with a new computing curriculum, with help from Google, Facebook, and some of Britain's most brilliant computer scientists. I don't actually remember any meetings where there were people from Facebook there, although I think many of us have Facebook accounts. Let's say I'm from Facebook. And yes, we did have some brilliant computer scientists in the room. So notice the change of name. Despite what he said in June, it's going to be an ICT curriculum, he's now taken the recommendation from the Royal Society and indeed from others that the word is computing. There are some of us who don't feel entirely comfortable about that. Information, communication, and technology, which of these do you not think it important that children learn about? Okay? But computing is just the name they're using there. Don't confuse computing as the title with computer science as the academic discipline. They're just replacing the ICT brand with the computing brand. So this is what you get. You get a set of aims. They should understand the fundamental principles of computer science. They should have this practical experience of writing computer programs. The two are not the same, but both have to be there as an aim, as an objective for the new curriculum document. Where there is IT stuff, they need to be able to evaluate and apply information technology, and we also have a broad understanding of digital literacy. I would suggest in this fourth aim about being responsible, being competent, being confident. There are words which Jim Rose provided us with. This one I want you to watch out for, please. Okay? Fourth aim says that they should be creative users of ICT. Okay? Hold on to that thought. That's there as an aim for the curriculum as it stands now. Okay, so we now get into nitty-gritty detail. Key stage 1. 5 bullet points up on the screen. Can you see those comfortably from the back of the room? Okay. We could spend time talking through each of these bullet points in turn. I'm not sure that that's going to be a particularly effective way of structuring the next bit of time. But you want to just have a look at that, those of you who are close enough to see, and say, that bit? How am I going to teach that? Or, no way does that belong on the curriculum. Or possibly, but they've forgotten to include, or if you wish, but you've forgotten to include, because some of this is tiny. Not all of it. Okay, don't really. But do you want to just have a moment and say, comment, should we break into think, pair, share groups? Should we talk to our friends about this? Or does anybody want to respond to this here and now? Thank you.
Sounds like people.
Yes! I'm so pleased you saw that. The Twitter conversation last night was, I can't possibly teach 5 to 6-year-olds. I bet you can teach 5 to 6-year-olds. The question is, you wouldn't want to teach 5 to 6-year-olds. But yeah, if I managed to get AirPlay mirroring working, I was going to show you the underlying bit. I was going to show you the Bebop app on the iPad at this point, because that's such a lovely way of teaching children to solve problems, to sequence instructions. You're absolutely right. Programming here can mean Bebots, can mean Probots. In the Piagetian sense, sorry, teacher training, I'm allowed to do education theory, aren't I? Okay, in the Piagetian sense, we're talking still about the concrete operation. I'd argue with digital natives. Do you want to object to digital natives now, or digital natives later?
I'll object.
I'll object later, that's absolutely fine. Okay, with the digitally native generation, they're very used to manipulating objects on screen. I think you can move on to screen turtles. But let's please play with Bebots here. Anything else you want to respond to, comment on this slide? Thank you.
It seems very much on that creative.
You noticed that, did you? Yeah. They've taken out, this is the thing I'm not happy about, is that they've taken out the statement we put in there about about using technology playfully and creatively and working with other people to develop digital media, digital content for an audience that they know. And to my mind, that's such a loss. You're allowed to teach that. As with the old program study, this is a minimum, not a maximum. If you want to teach children to work creatively using technology, that's absolutely fine. Nobody will tell you off for doing that. But it ceases to be an entitlement. I think that's a real problem. I'm pleased about what's on there. You may not be, but I'm pleased about what's on there. but I'm really disappointed about what's been left off. And that happened after the document left us. So that happened inside that. I don't know, honest mistake, if they didn't realise how important it was. Deliberate, who knows? As I said, there's nothing to stop you teaching it. But it seems a shame that it ceases to be an entitlement. Anybody else want to comment on this slide?
Can I just say, it seemed complicated. If you gave that to a normal class teacher, they'd say, well, what does this mean?
Yeah, are you looking at the AE word there?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And a lot of, we did, as you saw on the previous slide, there was this consultation period. And a lot of primary school practitioners said, algorithm, don't know what that means. Okay, you can Google that. Okay, you get a sense of answer. We're talking about solving problems with a step-by-step approach. Okay. How you start teaching the bebop thing is, walk forward 3 steps. This is an algorithm. Walk forward 3 steps, then turn right. That becomes an algorithm, and there's 2 steps involved, I suppose, otherwise it's just an instruction. So there are ways of teaching that, but it's deliberately using technical vocabulary. On the other hand, if you're in a school where you're using words like split vowel digraphs with children at the age of 5, then the word algorithm at the age of 6 is not too big an issue. And I've not checked it on the final version, but the word algorithm is mentioned in the maths program study as well. So it's not just my computer scientist friends who have to play the A word on that. But yeah, it's written by computer scientists and others. So they are using technical vocabulary. I don't think we should be afraid of technical vocabulary, but some process of interpretation may well be required. We did produce a set of guidance notes. They're not going to be precise. Anybody else on this slide? Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with Key Stage 2. Key Stage 2 is 4 years rather than 2 years. I need 2 slides to do this. Okay, so here's the programming bits or the computer science bits at Key Stage 2. All of this is online. You don't need to take a photograph of it, but you're welcome to do so. Again, a moment or 2 to read through. There's another slide for Key Stage 2, so don't get too disappointed if your particular lovely idea isn't yet to see. Again, do you want to respond? Do you want to question any of this? Do you want to comment on any of this? If I had more time, I'd go through and show you sequence selection and repetition. Do you notice the hand of the academic computer scientists there? Sequence is just putting the steps into order. Selection means if then, okay? And repetition means a repeat loop. If you've programmed a game in Scratch, those boxes are ticked. If you've written a drill and practice program in Scratch, what are 3 8s? What are 6 7s? Those boxes are ticked, yeah? As long as it says, yes, that's the right answer, or no, that's not the right answer, okay? So sequence is putting the steps in order, selection is if then, and repetition is a repeat until type structure. Okay, so all of that is Scratch games, all of that is, drill and practice maths. This thing that we were talking about earlier, about the difference between the internet and the World Wide Web, is there. And if it were me teaching this in Key Stage 2, I'd want them to do some HTML work. I'd want them writing their own web pages as part of this understanding that the web is a service provided by the internet. It doesn't say explicitly, children should be taught HTML. We tried not to specify technologies deliberately. But we kind of assume that the internet and the web came to be around a little bit longer than a couple of years until we need to do a new document. So I want to include HTML programming, and there's some lovely tools for that. If you're interested, Google, it'll be on the Twitter notes, Google Hackosaurus goggles for a great way into getting children to play around with HTML. The other bits of Key Stage 2, the thing I was talking about earlier about how does Google choose what it puts at the top of the list, and then doing the surveys online, using Excel for a purpose rather than just plan a party. Yeah, you can do some interesting things with Excel for data. Okay, again, do you want to make any observations on that slide? So, have you noticed anything was missing on this one? Creativity, yeah, I didn't find it either. Again, if you look back at what we sent in at the end of November, there was a big bit about what we creatively thinking about audience and purpose and all of that, yeah, and being able to reuse content and lots of other stuff. That's no longer there. And again, that breaks my heart as a strong statement. That's such a shame. That's going to feature in my response to the consultation. And if that's something that matters to you, put it in your response to the consultation. We won last time. He changed his mind about the basic curriculum. I think we had every chance of getting creativity reinstated as part of the ICT. Others saying that should be there. This is impossible to read even from here, but just to give you a feel of, that's what they've got to do at Key Stage 3 for computing, or computer sciencey bits. It's really, really ambitious. You think ours is bad? You just have a look at what Key Stage 3 is setting up. Okay, there's some really sophisticated 2 programming languages, one of which is textual. You've got to do something like Python or something in Key Stage 3. It's really, really ambitious. That's not a problem. But training a whole generation of Key Stage 3 ICT teachers and PE teachers and geography teachers and people who teach ICT lessons in secondary schools to teach to that specification, I think a lot of people have got their work set out there. And then we've got other bits outside of the sort of computer science bit. We have got creativity at Key Stage 3, which is nice for them. And we've also got the sort of digital literacy stuff coming in there as well. And again, intellectual property and audience is something that's important. Key Stage 4 is very, very limited. It's just really about carrying on with what they've done, developing those skills. The feeling was that we couldn't expect every child in the country to do a qualification in computing and ICT at Key Stage 4. And so the Key Stage 4 statutory requirement is something which is going to be very easy for all 15, 16-year-olds to be able to satisfy. You might want to say there's a lack of ambition there. You might think actually that's an entirely pragmatic approach. There are other things that they could well choose to do rather than computer science at this point. Okay. So, there's a public consultation for the next 12 weeks. Please do respond to that. He may well listen. Stranger things have happened. Okay? There should be a version, final version, ready for you to see for September 2013, so there's a whole year's lead into that. And then it becomes statutory as a program of study for every child in a local authority maintained school from September 2014. Terms and conditions apply. If you're working in an academy, a free school, or an independent school, you don't have to do any of that. And again, I wonder how much political agenda there is there. I come up with a very descriptive, knowledge-based curriculum. Progressive liberal heads might decide I'd like to opt out of that on my own. There's a mechanism for them to do so. It means losing the local authority support. Remember, it is minimal and not maximal. You're allowed to teach anything as long as you teach this. Yeah? You teach this and other things. Just because drama is not on the national curriculum doesn't mean to say you can't do school plays. Okay? I'm conscious of time passing, and Ken's going to want to do a presentation very soon. Let's just talk very quickly about assessment, because this is another big change for you folks. Levels are gone. Okay? Are there people who are pleased about that? Other people are sad about that. That's interesting. Okay, so we're losing the whole national curriculum level thing. Back in June, he said, I'm convinced by what the expert panel said that levels have been counterproductive. Children are more concerned about what level they are than what they've learned. And that's really serious. It matters to the children more than what they're understanding what they're learning. And so now, in the new programs of study, the new national curriculum document, you get this statement. They have to include an attainment target as part of the statutory definition of the national curriculum. The attainment target is now, can you do the stuff on the program of study? And isn't that about time? Doesn't that make sense? These are the things you're taught. Have you learned? Yeah. Rather than, what level are you? Because I'm teaching this, but I'm checking against that. So I think that's probably a very sensible way to do things. Nobody here interested particularly in EBAC, but with a big change week last Monday or thereabouts. So, a year ago we said, if you can persuade me that computer science GCSEs are sufficiently rigorous, I'll consider putting them into the EBAC. Vince Cerf, who's one of the guys who invented the internet, writes and says, this would be a good idea, you should put computer science into the EBAC. And so, just during the bench show, he says, on the 30th of January, I'm going to add computer science to the list of EBAC options on the science list. In order to get your EBAC points, you need to do 3 out of the 4 sciences and pass 2 of those. And so, you have that statement there. Interestingly, only the OCR and AQA GCSE computer science counts, and Excel and the Welsh board don't count for EBAC points. Interesting. Go. Okay, that's fine, carry on. There are issues with that, and I don't think there are many folks in the room who are interested in eBack. Other approaches to assessment. Remember, it's now about, this is what you're taught, can you do it? Anybody here involved with Scouts, Cubs, Guides, Grounders? Oh, not just 3 of you. Oh, what do the rest of you do with your life? You're not on Twitter, you're not in Lace, you're not in... Congrats, you have life. Fair enough. The Scouts, the Cubs, the Rallies, the Guides have got a really interesting approach to assessment. They look at whether a child can do something and they give them a badge when they achieve that. Can we not do this in the ICT curriculum? Can we not say, I've taught you this, you've provided me with evidence, here's a badge. No, not necessarily put it on your arm, although some schools no doubt will. Put it on your e-portfolio, put it on your blog. Mozilla, people who brought you Firefox, have infrastructure for this. They're doing these webmaker badges, which are gorgeous things. If you're interested in the Let's Teach Children HTML in primary school, have a look at the Mozilla webmaker resources. Some lovely stuff there. Okay, I'm running out of time. We're entering the post-national curriculum age. Those who are particularly in the secondary sphere, where we've got less than half of schools are still maintained by their local authority, they don't have to follow the national curriculum. So what is there in this document to persuade a school, yes, I will opt in to that? How are we going to do the initial teacher training? This is a real issue at the moment. Recruitment to secondary ICT courses or computer science courses is way down on last year's secondary ICT courses because the entry requirements are much, much higher. In order to get a place on a secondary computing course, you've got to kind of have a degree or at least match the contents of a degree in computer science. That's much harder than having a degree in IT. It's the diminishing pool that we're recruiting from. Professional development is going to be Key Stage 3 particularly. I think in Key Stage 2, Key Stage 1 as well. Teaching a new curriculum like this alongside all of the other new curriculums to study. There's real work set out for us there. We're going to need to take the program study and develop schemes of work. There will be commercial publishers doing that sort of thing. There will be organisations doing that sort of thing. I think that's the sort of thing which you might like to gather around and sit around the table and say, what shall we teach in our school? Writing a scheme of work is not rocket science, not even computer science. Okay? You can do that in your staff room. Seriously. You might like to do it with a few other schools so that you can share resources and ideas. But it's something you can do for yourself. Don't ask UCDA, not that they're here anymore, to do it for you. You should end up with something like the old schemes work. Assessment we still need to figure out. Resourcing this actually not too bad, because there are lovely, lovely resources like Lego and Scratch and so on that we can use to teach the new stuff. And the thing that worries me particularly is I'm sure we can teach Scratch just as badly as we've taught Excel or PowerPoint. If we focus on do this, do that. I was hearing from a student the other day who was doing Scratch with Year 2, which okay is ambitious. Their class teacher was telling children off for choosing the wrong colour for the sprite. Where's the creativity there? That's not, don't get me started. We're very grateful to that school for the placements they offer. Really we are. I'm going to skip through this, but there are other ways of doing it. Waterfall developing edge so far. The software industry has moved on to other ways, which focus on individuals and interactions, which focus on collaborating with their customers, which focus on the minimum viable product, getting something that works, and that focus on being responsive to the change in the room in front of you, rather than delivering a ring-like lesson plans. And there's more about that. Cathedrals and bazaars. Child at the heart of the education process. Anybody remember Clouder?
Yes.
And you're still teaching. That's brilliant. Okay. And then the personalisation stuff that we heard about sort of mid-2000s. Where's that gone now? Statutory curriculum? How personalised can that be? And then Henry Jenkins talking about 21st century skills. If you want to start on a blank piece of paper rather than following statutory curriculum study, that's not a bad list. It's not bad. There's computing stuff on there. It's not just about computer science. Okay, I'm sorry I've gone on and on. There's an email address up on screen. There's a Twitter thingy there if you want to use that, and a website which I occasionally blog on. I don't blog as much as I ought to or would like to. I'm too busy coming and doing that. Thank you very much.